Hi, everybody. My name is Gary Gomes. I'm here to talk to you about astrology in general. And I'm also going to talk about the stars, how they're going to affect you and your various sun signs and rising signs and moon signs from a Vedic astrology perspective, Eastern astrology, or Jyotish as it's commonly called. I'm also going to talk to you about the world and what it's going to look like over the next week or so. Um, so I have about 32 years background in Jyotish. You can look at my resume online, and I will be having another interview very soon with a man called Yuka. He's done some interesting work in Gemini astrology, which I'm very interested in. And it's a subdivision or a different set of Indian astrology, and he brings some interesting perspectives to it, and it's the entire astrology tradition from India. So I ran across him a few months ago, and I felt I would like to talk with him a few years ago, actually, excuse me. And I felt I would like to talk with him and share his perspective with you. As always, Vedic astrologers tend to disagree about a lot of things, so I don't expect we're going to be in complete agreement on everything, but that's okay. And I like people to get different perspectives when they're viewing this channel as well. Please do like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. I have moved into a better place, but I'm still in the process of setting up a studio. For those of you who can see, I'm a little scruffy. I haven't shaved in a few days. So I've been extraordinarily busy just moving around and going back to back. So enough about me. If you want to contact me for lessons or readings, I do like to do one-on-one tutorials with people. I do like to read charts. I've been doing it for over 30 years. And I've been told I'm pretty good at it. So that's enough of the plug. You can contact me at 508-525-0001. That's my cell phone number. I'm not doing free readings for people anymore. I've gotten a lot of inquiries about free readings. And it's I really don't have time to do them anymore, to be honest with you. That's really the function I'm working from. I'm getting very busy in my astrology practice. I'm trying to set up a school, and so we can have group sessions, and also so the teaching conditions can be more under my control. I've taught for a variety of institutions through the years. You don't have to go through that particular I don't have to go through that particular thing. And also I'm trying to write a book right now, so I'm trying to get clear up. So if you have questions about your career or your life or your spiritual life, I'd be happy to talk with you, but I will charge you some money if I do talk with you, okay, or if I do give you advice. I've given out a lot of advice for free over the years. I don't mind doing it, but when it starts eating in on other things I have to do, then I have to draw a line and say I need to charge. So let's look at the chart and see what's happening in general. So that's the wrong chart. Let's flip that over. That's the wrong chart. 2 also. So we go to a now chart. I'm going to take this down and put up another chart. It's currently October 16th. We have a Mars-Moon conjunction, so everybody's a little bit upset. Mars and Moon Mars was right at the end point of Taurus last night. And let's see now, a lot of people were getting kind of anxious. A lot of people were getting kind of hostile. A lot of people were getting kind of depressed. If as Mars moves towards the moon, usually I've noticed people tend to feel a little bit threatened, a little bit upset, excuse me, and a little more excitable than normal. And Mars was passing right over the moon. The moon was passing right over Mars last night, so that made everybody a little bit angry at everybody else. That's been going on for the past couple of nights. So, and you'll notice in this chart, I have a Scorpio rising, and I pulled up a lot of Scorpio rising charts over the past few weeks for questions. That seems to be the pattern that I'm encountering right now. And so we still have Saturn. It's kind of stuck in the third house in this chart. So that makes us determined to do what we want to do, but not really sure how we're going to do it. It has exercised additional control for world governments, like China has had more repressive tendencies over the past few months. A lot of countries have been more repressive. There's been more conservatism in business. You've seen that in terms of interest rates, and you see it in terms of people talking on the news right now about how they don't think that low unemployment rates are good news. That's rather disturbing to me, because I can remember times when economies have essentially slowed down, and the general exuberance that people feel is usually pretty wrecked by that, and they're usually pretty angry by that. Saturn aspects Jupiter right now, so that kind of hurts our optimism, makes us feel a little bit pessimistic about how things are going. Rahu is in the sixth house, so there's still some more concern or panic over disease, and also with this Mars Moon conjunction, there's also more threat of war. It's a large-scale war. Now, keep something in mind: this Mars is going to turn retrograde really, really soon. So around the end of the month, and it'll stay retrograde and go back into Taurus until around January 15th of next year. And that plus Saturn going direct around October 20th, and Venus coming out of its debilitation within a few days, within about 3 days now, will tend to make us, number one, a little bit more balanced emotionally. The retrograde of Mars tends to make us anger more quickly, but we won't be experiencing that until probably the end of the month. Mars is very strong right now. You can see this little score down in the corner there. That's called a Shadbala score, and Mars is about the second strongest planet after Saturn. Or Saturn, well, I think it's the strongest planet on the scale. So that makes Mars, even though it's an early degree, it makes it a little bit aggressive. And so that's going to make everybody just a little bit aggressive. Aspect in the second house, people are going to be angry. Aspecting the Sun, Mercury, and Venus, people are going to feel a little bit down, a little bit depressed, a little bit aggravated and agitated, but more willing to get things done. The Sun changes signs tomorrow, goes into Libra, and that will be bad for incumbents and bad for authority figures. As a matter of fact, this is the month you're going to see a lot of authority figures in jeopardy of losing their jobs. So roughly between October 17th or today, which is October 16th, and October 17th, you'll start to see moves more towards authority figures being removed from positions of power. Now, this means authority figures on both sides of the political tent. So, um, so this doesn't necessarily mean it's going to favor conservatives or liberals or labor or nationalists more than any other group. But you'll see attempts to usurp power, attempts to embarrass leadership a lot. Leaders making like really, really bad decisions, legal problems for leaders. And like I said, it's not going to be one party or the other. Right? It's not going to be one side, left versus right. And a lot of it will have to do with a lot of focus on the economy. The economy is bad in a lot of different countries. It's not just difficult in the United States. As a matter of fact, comparatively speaking, the United States is having a relatively easy time of it. But the kind of inflation we've been experiencing isn't sustainable. It's something which is going to is about a 10% annual rate, which is not really a sustainable. It's not hyperinflation like they were talking about in like we've heard mentioned in Germany prior to it in the 1920s. But it's pretty serious, and that's one of the reasons why a lot of economists, are talking about, just keeping up pressure to drive down spending and to drive down employment. And I've always thought that was the wrong way to combat inflation, but that's, I've never been in a position where I can actually do something about that. But that's just my particular take on it. Yours particular take on it could be, yep, we need to do this stuff. I think one of the things you can always do is increase supply. You don't have to decrease demand. You can increase supply. You can essentially overproduce. So that's one way to handle it, and that will lower prices because not many people will be doing it. But keep something in mind: people will be much, much, much more perfectionistic over the next couple of weeks because Mars is aspecting Saturn. It's not a mutual aspect, but geez, between now and I would say roughly around mid-December, especially right now, people are going to be like looking for like really precise details and being very upset if things don't go exactly that way. Okay, so that's something to be aware of. Jupiter won't go direct until November, and that'll be okay. Jupiter's in Pisces. It's a sign of faith. It's a sign of optimism. It's a sign of endings. Of certain barriers ending, and also it's a sign connected with philosophy. You'll start to see philosophies turn a little bit less fanatical, less rigid on both sides. So that's a good thing for everybody. But basically, the Saturn retrograde has been kind of a pain because it's been stopping us from moving forward collectively, internationally. This Venus in Virgo, even though there's a cancellation of debilitation in this particular sign, is never good because people are usually unhappy if Venus is in Virgo. It's close to its maximum debilitation degree right now. So this is really rough for relationships. People or relationship partners are going to be angry at each other, especially with that Mars aspecting Venus and Sun. So this won't last all that long, maybe about 3 or 4 more days maximum, because you'll see Venus move into K2, but Venus relationship partners will also seem to be a little bit flaky or forgetful, or maybe keeping secrets from each other because of K2 being in Libra. This will also be true about business environments and also about government, because Rahu is in Aries. This is usually a sign that governments want to exercise more control, but they're being frustrated in those attempts. So a lot of smoke and mirrors right now, folks. A lot. Really, we're not seeing real truth probably until around April of next year when Jupiter and Rahu are in conjunction. You'll also see scandals coming out about education, about teachers, about spiritual workers. So kind of be prepared for that around April, but it'll also bring fantastic opportunities in for people, especially for leadership and especially for new and novel ways and new and novel technologies being used to teach. So actually, it's going to be kind of an exciting time. And usually I've seen, really, at least in charts, at least in general, that people tend to get a little bit more creative when Jupiter and Rahu are together. It opens up new horizons for people. So let's go to individual charts. Okay, so for Aries this week, Rahu's is in Aries. We've spoken about this before. So this sign is going to feel very intense. It's going to feel like it's going to want to drive forward, make a lot of changes in its life, strong desire nature. A lot of activity really connected with the 8th house, too, which is partnerships. So you might see some arguments with partners and some arguments with, and maybe even desire for new partnerships. The moon in the 3rd house, changeable desires. Sun, Mercury, and Venus in the 6th house. The sign will have a lot of attention on its health, and Saturn and Jupiter, again, still this need to dominate, still this need to handle communications, and make people feel like things are going well when they're not really going well. This is for individual Aries signs, okay? But Taurus has, so I'm talking about Sun, Moon, or rising sign in this sign. Taurus has, and we're using a sidereal zodiac. I'm going to remind you of that. So this is May 15th through June 15th, roughly. Taurus has Rahu in the 12th house, so the heavy expenditure pattern for the sign will continue. Mars and Moon are in the 1st house, and that combination, this sign will have some expenses connected with its face, and it will have to watch out for injuries or damages to the face area. Or in terms of children will be a little bit spoiled, but relatively communicative. And K2 is in the 6th, so again, some caution about viruses, some caution about money matters. Saturn system, 9th house, bosses will be tough, but you'll make good money. And Rahu is in the 12th house, so that tends to give more dissatisfaction with sexual life and also with sleeping. So some insomnia for the sign. For Gemini has Mars and Moon in the 1st house. I'm going to stop sharing and start up again. For Gemini, let's see now. Mars and Moon are in the 1st house, so this sign will have a lot of aggressive energy, a lot of focus on gains, a lot of focus on friendships, a lot of financial progress, because we have the 2nd house Lord and the 11th house Lord merged in the 1st house, which is a kind of a yoga for money coming in, or a combination for money coming in. 3rd house Lord is in the 4th house, along with Mercury. the fourth house lord, and Venus. So although this sign has been more practically oriented, less romantically oriented over the past few months, love affairs or romantic involvements will start again for this sign, for a Gemini after around the middle of the week. And you may even see some deception on the part of the sign in terms of lovers or relationship life. Seventh house lord, so that Mercury in the fifth house, so is actually good. There can be some potential for unhappiness with relationship partners, and relationship partners will be a little bit too difficult to deal with this week, but career life should be good. And also, this sign will be doing a lot of research and a lot of, it'll have a lot of gains of authority over the next month. For Cancer, Cancer has Saturn in the seventh house, had it there for a while. So over the past couple of years, it's been a relatively stable but kind of unexciting relationship life for the sign. And Sun's the second house lord, is in the third house, so a strong desire nature for the sign. It wants to take on new ventures, new activities, represent new people. K2's in the fourth. It wants to represent people. It wants to spread its reach overseas. It wants to explore new lands. Jupiter's in the ninth house, so it'll get some luck. It'll also associate with people it's known in the past who can get it some luck. And overall, this is not a bad week for Cancer. That Saturn in the seventh house is problematic because business partners don't seem to be all that cooperative or helpful, but that'll change, but not for another couple of months. Leo has, Sun is in the second house. This is Leo rising. Sun is or Leo sun or Leo moon. There are some possibilities for fame for the sign because it's this thing called the Gati Lagna and Gatika Lagna in the first house, and Yupa Lagna. So relationship life will be strong for the sign. But primarily the thing we want to look at is the money house over here is pretty powerful in the sign, and so there are a lot of money indicators, although Venus has been holding it back. Venus will move into the third house, and this sign will be able to charm people into giving him money. Saturn is in the sixth house, so again, some feelings of being overworked. Jupiter's in the eighth. If Jupiter's in the eighth for this rising sign, children will be difficult, hard to reach, but there'll be a strong spiritual connection for the sign. Rahu's in the ninth. A lot of luck. It won't last, but you have to keep feeding Rahu in order to keep luck perpetual. And Mars and Moon, some increased value from friends, new friends, energetic friends, and you'll start to see more financial growth. For Virgo Lagna, this Lagna's had or sun or moon, Virgo rising sun. This sign has had a kind of a tough month. So is Libra, and I'll explain that in a second. A lot of that's going to shift as soon as Sun and Venus shift into Libra. And you'll have Mercury alone in its own sign. So this sign will actually have a relatively good period of time for about 2 weeks, while Mercury catches up with the Sun and Venus, and basically this sign will become very smart, very clever, very entrepreneurial over the next month. Mars is in this sign, so it won't hesitate to lie or misrepresent itself over the next couple of weeks, or stretch the truth or act a little differently over the next couple of weeks to increase its potential for gains. And Kate, who's in the second house, be difficult to understand this sign, just plainly put. Saturn is in the fifth house, excuse me. Saturn's in the fifth house. So perseverance, dedication to work will bring results for this sign. Jupiter's in the seventh. There'll be a lot of relationship opportunities. And Rahu's in the eighth. There'll be a lot of interest in metaphysical or spiritual sciences. So that's going to continue. That's relatively consistent, but at least Mercury's not going to, at least Venus isn't going to be hurt. So it'll help money out, and it'll also give unexpected sources of money. So that's good. Libra has had a problem over the past month or so, and it feels like it's been boxed in or it's been prevented from succeeding. And if Venus is in this sign by transit, it will tend to give unexpected or unusual or quirky relationship partners. You might have to watch out for relationship partners getting a little bit intoxicated or harming themselves. But the other thing you have to look at is over here. The Lord of the second house is in the ninth, along with the Lord of the 10th, which is a really good. I'm sorry, with the Lord of the second is in the ninth house, along with the Lord of the 10th, and that's very good for financial gain through job. Sun will be in the first house, so a lot of the person's attention will be focused on financial improvement. There will be some blocks, and the downside to this is this particular rising sign won't be noticed all that much, especially around the end of the month. But Saturn's in the fifth house. That's generally a good placement for the sign. Jupiter's in the sixth. That's actually a better placement for the sign than normal. So it will tend to make enemies helpful. It will tend to make people who you oppose helpful. Still some problems with relationship life that really won't go away until sometime towards the end of the next year. So difficult to please relationship partners. And finally, career life looks actually pretty good for the first time in a long time. And spiritual life looks great. Learning especially looks great. Scorpio has Jupiter in the fifth, which is generally a good placement. Saturn's in the third. That's generally good. Saturn does aspect Jupiter. That's a little bit detrimental to the house pattern, but basically it'll make kids hardworking. Rahu's in the sixth, so again there'll be this anxiety or this fear over disease. Mars is finally out of the seventh. It'll be back in the seventh relatively soon, within a couple of weeks, but it's out of the seventh. So this will make relationship partners more aggressive or more forceful about what they want. And finally, when we go down here, we have Mercury in the 11th house and Sun and Venus in the 12th house. So basically, this will give relationship partners spending a lot of money, but also less tension with teachers or less tension at work. For Sagittarius has Saturn in the second house aspecting the fourth house. So this will still give some problems at home. But again, a lot of financial gains, a lot of financial improvement. Rahu's in the fifth. Children, again, difficult to please. Mars and Moon in the seventh house. Relationship partners will tend to be much more aggressive than normal. And work-wise, you're not going to feel really that much of a conscience about telling untruths to further your agenda. So this is interesting. This is happening right before election season starts, and it'll extend into the startup of voting in most states. So this is going to be an interesting election. One of the eclipses, I should correct myself, one of the eclipses I mentioned last week will actually occur right on the election or on election eve. So there'll be a lot of controversy over the elections, especially in the United States. And I think you'll even see it in Brazil. Brazil is going to have a really, I think it's coming in October 20th in Brazil, if I'm not mistaken. So Brazil's going to have a lot of contentiousness. Let's go back to Sagittarius, though, because I do tend to do that. Sag should actually have a relatively good month career-wise. So don't worry about these combinations. These are like little white lies or little twists of the truth. For Saturn in Capricorn, Capricorn is going to have a very authoritative time. It's also going to have a lot of diplomatic skill. It will try to provoke anxiety, but will still not be recognized for career luck and career success. Venus and Mars and Moon in the sixth house, they should be very careful of accidents over the next couple of weeks. Okay, be very careful driving, be very careful about cuts. Finally, getting back to this case, some problems with friends or friends will be a little bit odder than usual. And finally, or a career will be a little bit odder than usual, not a lot of noticing career matters. And essentially, it's a good month for financial gains for the sign. For Aquarius, Aquarius has Neptune in it, which we see it's right at the end of the sign. It's about to go into Pisces, into its own sign. But so a lot of the delusional elements that Aquarius has been experiencing over the past few years will tend to go away. But also, so this is going to take about at least a few weeks for that transit to occur. But also Saturn, who's the traditional ruler of Aquarius, will be focusing a lot on expenses. Jupiter in the second house, there'll be a lot of money coming in. Rahu's in the third house. A lot of courage for the sign. Mars and Moon are in the fifth house. A lot of increased financial success and luck from children. Sun, Venus, and Mercury are in the eighth house. That's not really a good placement for this particular rising sign. You want Venus to go into the ninth house, which it will be in within a few days, and so you'll see an increase in luck over the next week. And Sun will also go into the seventh, into Libra, so you'll start to see relationship partners being less dominant for this sign. Finally, we want to go to Saturn, the 12th Lord. Again, as I said before, a lot of focus is on expenses. Jupiter is in the first house in Pisces. That's not a bad placement. That tends to bless the entire chart, but it's aspected by Saturn, which will tend to make a lot of the luck that's inherent in this chart rather difficult to realize. Finally, getting onto the sign, because I do tend to leave the sign in the lurch in earlier incarnations of this broadcast. Rahu's in the second house, a lot of financial gains, a lot of financial improvements, especially at home, and because of Mars in the fourth house. And Sun, Venus, Mercury, and Venus in the seventh house. Relationship partners will seem to be bright, a little bit immature, a little bit fickle, but more appropriate than the ones that you've experienced before. Venus is in the eighth house. This chart will seem to be very, very attractive this month. Ninth house Lord is Mars. Is placed in the fourth house. That's technically 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's technically a Dana Yoga or a wealth-producing combination. So this chart will see a lot of financial gains this month. And finally, Saturn in the 11th house. Friends will be a little bit depressed or downhearted. And I think you'll see a lot of financial improvement for the sign over the next month or so. Still, we have threats of inflation. We still have threats of they might go down a little bit before the end of October, but I'm tending to doubt that because Saturn is still aspecting Jupiter and will be aspecting. And so that will, unfortunately, let's go to the mundane chart. I think what's going to happen is you're going to see a kind of a cliff in the economy worldwide, and it'll go down for about 3 or 4 months and then come back up again early next year. The other thing you have to be careful about in these particular transits is, again, like I said, government is inherently unstable at this particular point in time. It's not that it's and it also wants to make a lot of changes. So that Rahu in Aries tends to bring in ideas that a lot of people are uncomfortable with. So that's why you're seeing a lot of resistance in schooling in the public. That's why you're seeing a lot of new policies coming in the public. That's why you're seeing a lot of new policies coming into play in the military. They're an extension of earlier policies that were suspended during the last administration in the United States. But they gained sort of a second life because of Rahu and Aries. Now, when Rahu leaves Aries, which will be about a year from now, you'll start to see some of those new ideas start to take hold in religious and spiritual institutions much more so than in government, but that's where they are right now. And also, I would say some fairly radical concepts in religion and spirituality just because of Neptune being in the same sign as Rahu. Although you don't really need to have Neptune in there. You already have Jupiter in there. So there'll be this sort of like what I would call overthrow of traditional religious leaders or spiritual leaders or scandals connected with them. So this will not only, and also with schools, to be truthful. So over the next couple of years, a lot of the educational and spiritual institutions that we're familiar with starting in April of next year will come under attack. Okay, so let's look at the time-space change chart. That's the astro mapping chart. Okay, so hope you can see this. Yeah, man, I should make it bigger. Thank God. Okay, so we're seeing some activity, some Mars activity in the Aleutian Islands, and so some possibly of flooding or heavy rainfall near the Aleutians and near Hawaii. The Moon and Mercury are in next to Hawaii and Jupiter. So again, I think what we'll see from this, along with Venus being close to the West Coast, is some potential flooding. Institutions and government will tend to be under attack in both Washington and Oregon and California, Northern California. We have Saturn going down through Arizona and New Mexico line up through Montana and a little bit connected with Utah and Wyoming. And usually what happens when Saturn lines come in is you'll tend to see either restriction or some government shifts. And there's a cross line in New Mexico between Saturn and Rahu. So I think you're going to see a lot of trouble connected with the border there. Maybe even a lot of political scandal in there. It looks like in New Mexico and in Arizona. The scandal line goes all the way up through North Dakota and South Dakota. So I would expect to see the middle part in Oklahoma and not Oklahoma, excuse me. I have to look at that state more carefully. That's New Mexico, through Kansas, North Dakota, South Dakota. Okay, so I think the middle part of the country is going to see some scandals, and also you'll see some scandals up in Canada. A lot of dissatisfaction, lack of available goods, lack of available products. So Saturn tends to promote scarcity, and Rahu tends to promote. So this part of the country and Canada and Mexico will have Rahu tends to promote dissatisfaction. Will have people really unhappy with their local government for letting this happen, for letting the scarcity of goods happen. For the East Coast, we have a line going through, we have a Jupiter line going through Massachusetts and New Hampshire. Sorry to be so Massachusetts centric, but it really is going through that state. It's also going through Maine, New Hampshire, and Rhode Island. So you'll see flips in, you'll see unexpected results in those states, although more conventional than unconventional behavior, at least politically. And also down through the Dominican Republic and Haiti, and some Mars lines. So the Dominican Republic and Haiti are in a heap of trouble right now. Most of you who watch the news know that. Puerto Rico's still in a heap of trouble, connected with a hurricane. And also, if you look carefully, there's a Mars line running through Ecuador, Colombia, and I think what you're going to see is some violence in those parts of the world. And let's see now, and some changes, some more return to more traditional values in Colombia, Ecuador, and Venezuela. Let's see now. There's a Mercury line running through Brazil, so there'll be increased communications about Brazil. The Venus Sun line going through the centers of Brazil, the mouth of the Amazon, and down near Rio and Sao Paulo, I think is really interesting because you have, I'm just trying to think of a good way to put it. You'll have a lot of conflict or unhappiness about the government. So I am expecting to see some violence after the Brazilian elections. Mars is running through, there's a Mercury line running through, excuse me, there's a Mars line running through Central America right here, the southern tip, so you may even see some violence in Panama. And see now, and there's a Mercury line running through Argentina, and close to Uruguay and Paraguay, and those countries will tend to have better communications with the outside world than normal. Moon is passing over the Azorian Islands, so there's some possibility of violence or earthquake or accidents there because of Mars being so close to that line. And Iceland also has some potential for earthquakes or volcanic activity because of this Mars line passing over Iceland. The only line really affecting England right now is a Saturn line, although it's between a Saturn and a Mars line. So you'll be you'll be seeing a lot of protests about the government in England, a lot of concern about the government in England. And already the new prime minister is being criticized for not sticking with her ideals or values. Saturn is also going to France, the Scandinavian countries, Sweden, Norway, Finland, not really affecting, and Denmark to a certain extent, and kind of touching on Germany, where there's also a Mars line going through Germany, which is kind of weird. So you can see some violence in Italy, in northern Italy, and Germany, maybe even in Switzerland, and all throughout northern Africa, and down through Central Africa. The other line we have right here is just a Jupiter line running through Germany and Finland and close to Eastern Europe. And basically when that happens is you'll see sort of like a return to traditional values, more of a concern with justice. Mercury's over here. That'll create sort of like a lot of political lies. Saturn is running through Eastern Europe and Turkey, and it's in conjunction with Venus. So although this is a hardworking society, there'll be some pressure put on the government because the line has come out down near Ankara, to do something, or to do something positive for the country. And there's a Rahu line right through, basically through the action where the Ukraine is. And that Rahu line essentially indicates there won't be any fulfillment of ambitions. There'll be a lot more fighting. This is going to go on for another few months, at least. I'm sure of that. So this Rahu is some danger of nuclear weapons, but because Rahu is there, but I'm also thinking it can be new technology, so different kinds of weapons. The other thing is you have countries to the south like Syria and Iran and Iraq, also on this Rahu line. So, and also Saudi Arabia. So you can see some discontent with the governments in those parts of the world. The other line I want to bring your attention to is this Mars line. Mars just entered Gemini, so it's not really that prominent a factor in this chart, but I just have a very strong feeling it'll cause some internal strife in Russia, India, and Russia, Eastern India, Bangladesh, and there's some financial hardship and some suffering definitely happening in Russia, all the way down through Pakistan and Afghanistan, and also into Western India. So India is surrounded by malefics right now, so that's not a good thing. I mean, it's largely untouched in the center, so that's good for it, but it does look like it's going to have some pressure on it, a lot of extraordinary pressure on it, and some possible conflict with the Chinese, although that could be misleading. There may be a land dispute. Mercury's passing over China right now. Jupiter's passing over China, so there has been the zero tolerance policy for COVID, which is hit in China, and some there are convinced this is the absolute right thing to do. So I don't think you're going to get them shifting off this, but the economy is suffering in China. These lines tend to indicate that. It's really fluctuating. Vietnam is doing better. Indonesia is doing better. Australia is doing better, but uh, China is really hurting, and so is Korea, for that matter. Korea's government is going to face kind of a crisis over the next couple of months, it looks like from this chart. Um, I hope I'm wrong about that, because I do like stability in governments. But I think this may not be a time for stability. The other area I'd encourage you to look really, really carefully at is around Indonesia. There's a lot of activity happening around this part of the world, and a lot of activity happening around Eastern Europe and Egypt and Eastern Africa. So those are parts of the world I'm a little bit concerned about. There's a lot of malefic activity. So right now, malefics are dominating the chart. There's no polite way to put it. Mars is aspecting Saturn. Saturn's aspecting Jupiter. Mars is also aspecting Venus, Sun, and Mercury, although the Venus-Sun aspect's only going to last for about a day or so. But Sun is going to go into a sign of where it's debilitated. It's really weak. Venus is going into its own sign, so that should offset things just a little bit. But it still looks like a tough time ahead for at least another month, just based upon the planetary transits. So if I were you, and I'm not you, but if I were you, these are the parts of the world I would pay close attention to. I would pay close attention to. Let me get this little guy out of the way. I pay close attention to the South Pacific, Hawaii, the oceans, and the west coast of the United States, all the way to New Mexico, also through central United States. In terms of the East Coast of the United States, not so much happening, although everything seems to be bigger or more traditional in that part of the country right now. And I'd also watch carefully Santo Domingo. Santo Domingo, that's right, and the Dominican Republic and Haiti. My apologies, because we have two lines going through there. We do have a lot of communication happening from Puerto Rico, but the other part I really focus on is Brazil, because Brazil, I know Brazil's got an election. I know it's a contentious election. I'd also focus heavily on Portugal, Spain, England, and Western Africa for bad economic news, and also Scandinavian countries for bad economic news, and some signs of fighting in Bangladesh, or catastrophe in Bangladesh, or western or eastern India, and also in what is referred to as Southeast Asia. Okay. Saturn is affecting New Zealand, so that's kind of an economic turn down kind of a scenario. And there's a little bit of panic in Japan right now, and a little bit of a recession starting in Japan right now as well. I forgot to mention that earlier. But these areas are really important. I'm circling them with my cursor. And over here. Okay, so that's about it for this week. I'm going to like you to get back to your daily routines, whatever that may be. And thank you again for watching. Again, if you want to contact me for reading or for lessons, please do so. My email is Gary Gomes, G, the letter G, at gmail.com, or you can contact me on my cell phone at 508-525-0001. Thank you very much for watching. I love you all. Namaste. Bye again.